The scrap metal recycling industry has always run on hustle, trust, and sharp instincts. This is the podcast for traders and operators who want to get sharper without losing their scrappy edge. I'm Stu Kagan, bringing you insights and stories from the people shaping the future of our industry. This is Born Scrappy.
All right, guys, let's cut the music. It's going to get a little bit more serious than a bit earlier. So we're going to kick off this talk, and obviously this panel is about tariffs, and I'm pretty sure this isn't the first tariff panel you've listened to in the last year or two, but hopefully we can go quite deep on certain topics, and there's a whole lot of new things that have been happening as well in the last few months. So hopefully we give you guys some knowledge you might not have had before. That's really the aim here. So before we get, we've already been scored 10 out of 10. Thank you. Did you see? Look at that. Wow.
What was that?
There we go.
Thanks, George.
Fantastic. Oh, 11.
11 on 10.
Wow. Okay, so I think to give us some context, Erin's going to kick us off. She's got a few slides she'd like to run us through as well to put some context around all of this, and then we'll kick into the panel questions. Erin?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to kick off with a little bit of an overview of just some of the issues we've been dealing with this year. This definitely does not cover it all. Many of these are new just in the past couple weeks, but I just wanted to go over it because I will be walking around afterwards if anyone has questions. We cover a lot of this on our monthly trade and tariff talks that me and my boss Adam do, but we have seen an expansion of tariffs in all of these sectors, steel and aluminum, copper. We now have new investigations into industrial machinery, labor, excess capacity. We also have a brand new 10% global tariff of the past couple weeks. And we have the US, Canada, Mexico agreement review that's happening in July, which will greatly impact our industry. So these are just some of the things we might touch on today, but again, please find me if you have any questions. And I wanted to just show some data of what 2025 looked like for our industry. I am going to actually start over on the third kind of panel there. That is finished steel that is being imported into the United States, and you can see the tariffs are working. We are down quite a bit from the year before, but you can see for our industry, recycled steel, consumption in the United States is great. Domestic consumption is doing really well. We are exporting, we're down 19%, which means all that recycled steel is being consumed here in the United States and that the market is very healthy. And we always do watch pig iron on the end there as a substitute. As you can see, the imports are growing. It's something REMA keeps its eye on. But yeah, I just wanted to put this up there as an overview of kind of where we stood at the end of last year.
Thanks, Erin. Just so you all know now, at the end, we're going to try and leave about 5 to 10 minutes for some Q&A. So during this panel, if you think of any questions, maybe write them down. And when we call you up, there's a microphone there later for you guys to hopefully ask the panel some questions. But let's jump into it with you, Erin, because there's been a lot of tariff announcements, pauses, revisions, and even court rulings lately. From the association's perspective, what are the 2 or 3 developments in the past few months that actually matter most for how scrap is moving?
Well, I think the biggest one was the Supreme Court ruling on IEEPA, which is the emergency tariffs. IEEPA just basically stands for the authority or the law that he enacted them under. Those were overruled, and so we are currently in this kind of waiting phase of issuing refunds, and also he is now rebuilding the tariff regime. So that is probably the biggest thing in the past couple months. You know, this is a very unique time where every single country has one tariff rate, 10%. Last year, that was not the case. We had some countries as high of 40, 50%, others, as low as 10. So I will say this is a great time if you need to import something. It's 10% across the board. For those countries that had higher rates, we expect for those to go back up at the end of the summer once some of these investigations are over and he rebuilds some of this tariff authority. So it's a very unique time compared to last year. I think secondly, the biggest thing was we saw steel and aluminum tariffs get vastly expanded. They're at 50% currently for many derivative products, including a lot of equipment I know all of you use every day. And calculating that tariff, the steel and the aluminum, the amount that is in the product to then calculate how much your tariff would be is very difficult. And it's something we've been conveying to the administration because it's nearly impossible to comply. And we know compliance costs are very high right now. So they are trying to find a new way to off-ramp some of those products and figure out an easier system to calculate those tariffs. So I would say those are two of our big priorities is, figuring out this new tariff regime that's going to be coming out this summer and also working on getting some of this equipment exempted.
So just the other day, I was in the BIR and George Adams got up on stage and told everybody that the tariffs are the best things to happen to America, which was very enlightening, and really enjoyed the talk. It was brilliant, and it was great to hear somebody on stage actually talk like that. But let's remove politics right now, and I want to ask you the question, because you just said something, tariffs are working, which is not something I often hear. So can I ask all three of you, has anybody benefited from the tariffs so far?
As a business?
Has anybody benefited so far?
I think the steel industry has definitely benefited, and you heard that from George Adams on how it's working, and the data shows it's working. I believe the US government has collected over 150 billion in tariffs, and now they have to figure out how to refund it if this were to go through. That's over several million entries. So it's going to be a period of chaos.
Let's stick to who's benefited.
Yes,
avoid
depending
all
on who benefited,
politics.
yes.
Who's benefited? So you're saying the government's brought money in, and you're saying the steel mills have benefited.
The steel mills have benefited because there has been better consumption. But on the non-ferrous side, I wouldn't say that anybody has benefited.
Yeah, I would argue the other way. I mean, we saw at the beginning of the year the consumers that we primarily utilize our sales to, we all thought, both the consumer and the processor, that the 232 increase in semi-finished stainless slab coming into the United States would go down, and therefore our utilization rates in our stainless mills in the US would go up, right? That just makes sense. And we've seen the opposite. The data tells us opposite. I can give you my personal opinion. My personal opinion is there's countries, governments that are subsidizing their steel mills and paying the additional tariff for them. They allow them to keep dumping their slab at a much cheaper price in the United States of America. So from our standpoint, nobody has won in our industry from the increase in the 232. Maybe if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, you could argue the iron component of stainless steel is up a little bit because steel pricing has been up a little. We could get into the weeds with that, but on a macro level, I would say it's not working.
Yeah. To clarify, when I say that the tariffs are working, I'm saying for finished steel that these tariffs have been in place since 2018. They are working in the sense of it is combating some of that excess capacity. However, for our industry in REMA, we don't support tariffs. We don't support export controls. We believe in a free market. We think products go where they're most needed. And often what you're seeing with stainless, right, when you try to control where those flow and where they go, it's something called the control reversal theory, where it actually has the exact opposite impact. And we're starting to see that. I think the administration is slowly starting to realize that you cannot build up your manufacturing base without some key inputs and equipment. And we don't make everything. We don't have all the processing capabilities here in the United States yet.
But look, coming from somebody who's experienced real export controls in South Africa, trust me, I have the same opinion. We need a free market, absolutely vital. But I'm looking from the outside in where I have no skin in the game, and I see the steel prices domestically higher than they've ever been compared to Turkish exports. So I'm thinking that if no one's benefiting, surely the local scrap markets that are selling ferrous into these mills, surely they're benefiting compared to what they were maybe doing and sticking it into Turkey before?
I don't trade steel. I often hear my friends say that the delta between number one busheling and HRC is actually widening. But I don't know that game, right? I talk to a lot of people, so.
I want to give it the context from the scrapyard. Make sure that because I think when George got up, a lot of people are like, yeah, well, if you're doing the ferrous volumes he's doing, of course you're benefiting. So I'm just trying to try and understand it from that side as well. Josephita, let's go to you now for a while and talk us through an experience that you've had where tariffs directly affected the economics of a trade that was already in play. What was the material, what changed, and how did you kind of adapt at the time?
So in 2018, there were tariffs on Trump 1.0. There was tariffs on aluminum and steel, but it did not apply to scrap. So we're thinking Trump 2.2, it's probably not going to be impacted either. So if history is any direction to how things were and what is going to be expected, no one expected that aluminum scrap, for example, would be impacted. But since the beginning of last year, when the IEEPA tariffs went on, there was at least a baseline of 10% that was applied to aluminum scrap. Now, our businesses doesn't work on 10% margin, or we can't just overnight assume that 10%. So any aluminum scrap that was coming into the United States from any other country besides Canada and Mexico were subject to those tariffs. So instantly, without any warning, that is something we have to assume or we have to work around. That was one immediate impact that we, all of us as an industry, were faced with. Tariff is only one of many trade barriers that our industry faced last year. As we saw in the previous slide, there were a lot of 232 investigations, and there was also some 301 investigations. 232 is the national security, and 301 is unfair trade practices. And one of them was on China shipbuilding. What that entails was the investigation's result came back with, we don't make ships or vessels in the United States. So all the material that we move to and from the US are going in vessels that are made directly in China or by a Chinese-owned company. And that investigation proposed that we might be hit with costs of $1,000 or $2,000 per vessel, per port call. So sometimes a vessel, let's say it goes to New York and then it goes to the next port and the next port. So every time the vessel goes to a port, we were going to be subject to all those costs. So we have one direct tariff, 10% at the very minimum for aluminum, and the potential at that time proposed 301 shipbuilding costs. So if you start factoring in all these costs, it just doesn't make sense to do the trade anymore. And we were in a very uncertain time, but big part thanks to Rima and Adam and Erin and the entire team that worked so tirelessly in trying to submit public comments and get back with some clarity. And thankfully, the administration made a different decision. And so now we are in a place where at least the 301 shipbuilding cost is not there. And I wouldn't say we can work with 10%, but that was an instant change in economics that we had to deal with and decide, what direction does material go now? Does it make economic sense to make the trade happen? So that's...
And Dave, you're buying, I think you mentioned you're buying quite a bit from Canada as well.
We buy, the US and Canada.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, exactly.
North America.
What's actually changed for you operationally in the last year? So is it just affecting on the price? You're just offering different prices? No change at all? No paperwork change? Nothing?
Just one time. Just one time did it change. No, with the USMCA has, except for 70 hours, right? There was a 70-hour gap where we got caught. The USMCA has stayed in effect, and the administration has not tariffed scrap metal moving across the border back and forth from Canada.
Awesome.
Just one time.
Just one time, and it was only 72 hours or something, you said.
Right, so if let's just make up a story. If you had rail cars of 316, this is a true story. If you had rail cars of 316 loaded and you thought, well, they're going to ship in plenty of time and cross the border and clear customs, we'll be fine. And they get hung up at a switch, which happens a lot with the rail. And those rail cars cross the border during that 70-hour window. We did get hit with a pretty hefty, it was a significant tariff.
Erin, you guys are dealing with, everybody from the industry on the ground, at the ground level. What do most recyclers misunderstand most often about tariffs? So what are kind of the questions you're getting, like, oh, wait, you've missed something, you don't understand something?
Well, understandably, it's usually I'm importing this. What is the tariff? Because every country had a different rate. And some people like Dave, for example, does mostly Canada, so he knows to claim origination and that it's covered under USMCA. But if it's your first time doing that, you might say, oh, well, I see a 35% tariff for Canada. How do I claim origination? Which is why that agreement is so critical for this industry. And we are watching it very closely as the review comes up in July, because that has really saved us this year, that we've been able to get products from Mexico and from Canada. But I would say that the claiming origination, there's a lot of questions on that. Tariffs stack. A lot of tariffs, some 232s stack, some don't. The IEEPA tariff stacks with certain things, 301 stack. So how do you add up all of those? We, for example, like shredder wear parts, has now a 50% tariff, a 232 from every single country. However, we have gotten the 301 tariff from China exempted. So, it's just a lot of compliance, and it's a lot of extra cost for everyone having to hire a customs broker and a trade attorney and be a member of REMA to get all of this information for it to make sense.
Kind of happy I'm not on the ground anymore, especially not in the US. Joe, talk to me about how contracts have changed. You're buying constantly in the US, moving material around the world. Have you actually made any changes to your contracts?
I would say we haven't really made any significant changes to our contracts. Before we conclude business at both ends, we evaluate what's at risk, take calculated risks, and agree to terms ahead. It could be
terms different. So what I mean by that is, are you now taking all the risk as a broker? Are you taking the risk and saying if a tariff comes in, it's on me? Or are you actually putting a clause there that says if a tariff is incurred during this period while your material is in the water, that is paid by you?
I'm going to pause for a second before I answer that question. I think we've talked about a lot of things, tariffs, stacking, 232s, 301s. So let me just break it to this room if you're not already aware. Tariffs don't apply to anything in the Annex 2 list of HTS codes and products. That means if you're bringing in zinc, for example, or stainless steel or titanium, one of these materials or products, recycled materials, there is no tariff on those. So there is no question of what do we have to pay or what do we have to include. So that makes it easier, and we don't have to negotiate terms for those products. So it helps to know what those products are. Copper was also in that list, so brass and many of those things. So that made it easier in the non-ferrous list. The only things where we had to be really concerned about tariffs was aluminum and steel.
Yeah.
The highest out of the two. We don't deal in steel, and in aluminum, we just limited what we brought in. For example, there are countries that has only a 7-day transit time to the States. So we can easily accommodate anything within 15 days to a 30-day period. If something's going to take 60 days or 90 days, we'll probably just ship it to a different part of the world rather than bring it to the States and undergo contract renegotiations or things like that.
Okay. That answers. I've heard in the market of people changing their contracts with what's coming in. And being
the consumer.
So when it's whatever's coming in, correct.
So the mills that we deal with that are signing a longer contract, what used to be 8-point font is now 800-point font DDP, right? So it's all on us. It's delivered, duties paid. That's what DDP is. So the mills, we don't broker anything. We handle everything we buy. So I don't know if it's changed for that because I don't do it. But from what we do, actually physically buying and selling metal, scrap metal, that part of the contract is in a much, much bolder detail, yes.
And Dave, with you bringing in material, is there anything you've changed in your contract or the way you handle it, just in case something, you had that 72 hours, you probably paid a lot of money there. You haven't changed anything in your purchasing agreements?
We have not.
Okay.
A lot of what we do is on a handshake, though. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, our contract is one sentence. It's not crazy.
If we agree to things, we stand by it.
Correct.
No matter what changes in the market or tariffs or anything else, a war on one side and freights go up. If we've made a deal, it's a deal. We stand by it.
And this last 2 weeks, I would suggest we've seen that a lot, right? Lenny, where's Lenny? Lenny said earlier about diesel prices. So stuff that I bought FOB and I get a trucking rate today versus 2.5 weeks ago, it's almost double, right? And I don't think the trucking guys are trying to put it to me, but they're up against it too. It's just, it's amazing. And to Josephita's point, we eat that. Dominion Nickel eats that because we agreed to buy it, picked up your door. That's on me, right?
Yeah. For all of you, if the market stays exactly where it is right now, right, where we kind of think of maybe it's a decent space right now, what happens in the next 5 years versus if it goes back to what we experienced previously?
Well, it is going to go back for sure. I can confidently say that because basically we're in a holding pattern because of the law. You know, we're in this 5-month, 10% area because he doesn't need congressional approval for that. However, these investigations have, you know, we're going to go testify, we have to submit public comments, they have to do a few things, check the boxes, and then all of those rates, I think, will go back to where they were, if not higher. And I'm just saying that because that's worst case scenario. Maybe they'll be lower, but I do think they'll be at least where they were under IEPA. And I do think possibly many of them will stay from the first Trump administration. President Biden kept many of those tariffs in place. He kept the Section 232 on steel and aluminum. He kept the Section 301 on China. So these can be passed from administration to administration. So it really depends, you know, who's our next president, what's their agenda. The first year was really focused on bringing manufacturing back for the American jobs, the American worker. The rhetoric has really changed given current events to defense, national security, and our industry is, we just submitted comments today for a critical minerals. They're trying to do a critical minerals agreement, and you know, me and Adam are reading it, and we see metal scrap listed as a critical mineral. So our industry is seen as a very essential industry, and they want to control it and nationalize it more and more. And we are trying to ensure that that free market stays open. But I think 5 years down the road, it's really going to depend, you know, what current events are going on, you know, what's going on in the world, because that has really shaped like the rhetoric around the tariffs and what they're being used for.
Joe, have you guys changed anything in the business where, you know, you've had to take tariffs into account? As in, have you got somebody full-time? I think it's kind of you, but is there something you mentioned earlier, Aaron, about like having to hire people? Have you found that it's had an impact on your business where there's a lot more time spent on that? Maybe there's some form of different structure. Maybe there's a Monday morning meeting every week. What changes actually happen operationally in the business?
We look at the data. We look at it more closely than once a week. More optics, more detailed optics. For example, we don't know when an announcement's made. It doesn't go into effect 30 days from now. A lot of things just go into effect from Monday or within a week. So we need to know, we've loaded containers, did it really sail? Is it arriving in time? If it arrived in time, is it custom cleared? There are so many information. We would initially only look at, okay, we've loaded it, ETA is this. We didn't look at so many other optics in the middle. So now we're measuring as much as we can, and we can only manage what we measure. So far more measurements, and at any given time, having access to data is the key to managing whatever comes from the administration, or changes in rules, or a war on one side is delayed arrivals to the States and things like that. So yes, we make sure we have data available at any given time in order to make the decisions.
And Dave, on your side, I want to ask you something similar, but I know you spend a lot of time in the association, so you're actually quite close to it. But do you find that there's anything in your business that kind of people are on top of it, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, data that they're pulling from certain places? The reason why I'm asking you guys this is hopefully, you know, either in the crowd right now or listening on the show, these are things that other people can implement, right? So what are the kind of things that you think you've implemented or somebody else can that just wants to make sure that they're ahead of the game? And like I said, I mean, I remember going through the COVID period, and I had 4 yards at the time in New Zealand, and we had like a weekly meeting. Granted, it was almost daily in New Zealand, but like there was a weekly meeting. It was just about how are we dealing with, who knows what's coming next, who's heard anything. Is there anything you guys are doing in particular you think guys could do?
Not in particular, no. I mean, just as a broad statement, it just takes up space in your brain. I mean, we overcome obstacles. That's what we do as recyclers, right? It never goes according to plan. we all have the end goal. We all want to get to the finish line, but there's always a variation in the path to get there because weather, trucking, whatever it is, international conflict. So it just takes up space in your head. So what do we do about it? I mean, we're definitely, and I am plugged in, so our ownership group really appreciates that I'm constantly feeding them the information that our trade team and our representatives are feeding us. So that helps a lot. I think information is power. I think like she said it well. How do you measure what you don't track, right? So we track things differently. We're measuring variables differently, but day to day, we haven't brought on new staff to do that. So no, I don't have any. Take a deep breath and keep moving would be my advice.
Just the extra couple minutes every day, a couple of hours every day in your brain. Go to sleep a little bit later, a little bit harder to fall asleep at night.
It is harder to fall asleep at my desk after lunch, but I mean, I still find time to do it. So.
That's a lie. I'm sure it's still very easy for you, Dave. I just wanted to remind everybody that we'll give 10 minutes at the end, so probably in like 10 minutes time or so. If you've got any questions for the panel, we will give you guys some time to ask those questions. Aaron, I wanted to ask you, from the policy side of things, what developments are coming in the next 6 months or 12 months that we should be looking out for? So we spoke now about, are you keeping an eye on things? How is your team looking at things? What is there that we must make sure we are listening out for, whether it's from the association or whether it's in the press or whatever it's going to be? What are those things that the recyclers should be looking out for?
Well, the US, Canada, Mexico agreement, like I've said, President Trump really likes to negotiate bilaterally. So he's currently negotiating with Mexico. They met last week. He has not opened up dialogue with Canada, which concerns us. He likes to do it bilaterally for more leverage, but it is a trilateral agreement. They are definitely going to tighten the rules of origin, which means claiming origination is going to be harder. You're going to have to go deeper into your supply chain to claim that, because some parts from China and non-market economies, as we would call them, are still getting in. So that's going to be an increase in compliance. Also, if you're working with the EU, CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanisms, are slowly rolling out this year and the next 3 years. That's going to be a new compliance issue because it actually puts American recyclers at a competitive advantage, but we will need to provide more certification that this is where it came from and this is how it was produced to be able to export it to the EU. So there's a couple of things coming the next couple of years that are just going to make things a little more difficult. And also, we're going to be closely watching the steel and aluminum tariffs to see if they are expanded again or if there is an off-ramp for certain equipment. We're always watching those and hoping that, like shredders, we don't want to see that stuff on there because it's a very steep tariff and they don't go away. It's very hard to get rid of them.
Because I don't have yards anymore, I don't have equipment guys phoning me every single day, but is there currently this window that equipment guys are going, buy now, because it's only 10% instead of the 40 or the 50? Like, is this a window they should take advantage of if you're buying equipment?
If it's not 232, that stays in place. But if it's a piece of equipment that's not on it, and it's coming from like Vietnam or Brazil, it would be a great time to order it. But it needs to get here in less than 5 months. And there's usually no on-water exemptions anymore. That is a brand new thing. Usually there would always be like a 2-week period or a window where you got an exemption. We're not seeing that anymore. Like he puts out the executive order and that is it. So yes, come talk to me if you have a specific country you're wondering about, but it is a very unique time right now.
Okay, for all of you, what happens tomorrow if all tariffs disappeared? What would actually physically change in our industry? Nothing?
For us? No.
For you, Joe?
Probably more aluminum imports, which is probably hindered since the tariffs. So I think that would change the direction. Just
Aaron, for the metal recyclers in
I
general?
don't know, my job security, but
Dave, you would sleep better in the day, I'm sure. But
I think, for some people, it won't impact them, right? Because it's either exempted on Annex 2 or it's coming from Canada or Mexico. For equipment providers, service providers, they'll go to bed very happy because some of them are paying 50 to 100% tariffs on things right now. So it really depends where you're working and where you're getting your materials.
I think you'll see things change in July from our standpoint. We're more worried about what happens in July. Dominion Nickel is more laser focused on what happens in July. If this agreement we have with Canada and Mexico blows up, my personal opinion is there's a reason he hasn't engaged Canada yet. I don't think he will. So if this blows up, that changes everything we do.
So you think there might be, the outcome of that is a 50% tariff? Anything coming in from Canada?
I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I'm not sure, but who knows? Who knows what happens? I don't think there's a great relationship between PM Carney and United States President Trump. It's just not a good relationship. So,
I mean, in July, are you expecting that there's actually a date? So it's like, we will know on this date?
No.
Because weeks before that, do you stop buying from Canada in case something's on the way? You were speaking earlier about exemptions.
If you read the agreement, it just continues on, right? So I'm speaking for Dave Pestock. I'm not speaking for Dominion Nicoalos or the Fleischer family. I would suggest that the position is going to be to let it go every month. You might see a comment or a statement released, but I think there's going to be tremendous leverage applied through that agreement, especially if he can get something with Mexico first.
So Dave, I'll go back to, a question maybe from a little bit earlier. How are you going to strategically plan for this? Because if you've got 1,000 tons that you've purchased, I'm just making up a number, and all of a sudden that comes in overnight, that could have a massive impact on your business.
Sure. So your previous guest, you asked about inventory and positions, and if you don't like inventory, you would not want to tour our 26 acres. We always have a pretty good position, right? So we're very long-term focused. We marry you kind of person. We don't jump from home to home. The change in policy in Europe right now is greatly impacting what is going on in the United States, North American stainless steel market. Was just factored. A lot of the reason we saw pricing jump over the last 2.5, 3 weeks is because the European mills are coming into our markets, to our guys, to our processors, to us, and saying, what do you need? How many containers can you get me? Just name the price kind of thing. And obviously that puts pressure on the domestic mills for pricing, right? So if you're chasing the market, that's probably not good. If you're in a position, it's not a bad thing, right? So 1,000 tons, that really isn't going to change the way we operate.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, okay, so let's say it's 50,000 tons, and it's orders you've made from Canada over the last 3 weeks, and all of a sudden 50% tariffs come in. Is that something that keeping you up, I would say at night, but keeping you up in the day? And like kind of, you've got to always be thinking about that. And closer we get to July, are you going to buy more domestically in the US versus Canada just in case?
It takes up space in your brain. I go back to my earlier statement. I can't control what happens in Washington, D.C.
But you can control the strategy in your company.
Absolutely.
So is it something that you would have to consider? Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
I thought so.
We would have to find new homes.
That's a huge impact.
I would suggest that's a big impact. Yes.
Okay, I wanted to keep at least 10 minutes because a lot of people have got a lot of things to say about tariffs. So hopefully some people have thought of some questions. The microphone is right over there in front of Jason. So I think Sam might be coming up with a question. If you have any question, if you can just kind of like come around there to give us an idea of more questions to come. Don't be shy, please.
Thank you for doing this speech. It's pretty good. I had a question. We do a lot of container shipments overseas, and we also bring in containers from overseas. Regarding trade tariff, what do you think in terms of the cost of freight going overseas and coming back, especially with these wars that are going on? What is the impact? I remember from many, many years back where there was a war going on and the US government took over many of the containers going from here to other parts of the country, other parts of the world. So do you think that's going to be an impact this time, or do you think that the rates are going to, I mean, they already are going up right now, and what's your general thought?
Well, I know Josefita actually sent this to me not long ago, but there are increased rates if things are moving through the Middle East right now. I don't know if you remember the exact amount, but it was pretty steep for things moving through.
The rates keep changing every week since the disruptions in the Middle East. What we know for certain is there's definitely a rate increase, lesser for 20-foot containers and a bit higher for 40-foot containers. On the export side, it's $100 to $200 in that range. On the import side, it is $3,000 to $4,000. So we're looking at an imbalanced rate increases depending on the direction it's going and the route it needs to take. This is as of this week. Things could change next week if things compound. We don't know if it's going to be a set in stone, but for now, one thing we know for sure is there's definitely going to be a rate increase and we need to brace for it.
Yeah, I think I heard anything going through the Straits of Hormuz, you're looking at like a $1,200 increase for exports through there as well. So freight's definitely impacted. But Sam, I think you had some questions around tariffs as well in that, or was it just particular freight right now with oil?
Yeah, it's indirectly the freight. And in terms of the tariff, do you feel that maybe in 6 months or so, the tariff, because I read articles from both sides where they're talking about steel tariffs coming down, and there's many articles that they're going up. There's no real answer, and we can't figure it out.
Yeah, so the articles you're reading about them going down are kind of what I was discussing with the steel and aluminum derivatives. They are trying to find a way to either off-ramp them or lower the tariffs on those derivative products. Now, on just steel and aluminum coming in, I don't see that going down. Those have been in place for a long time, but they did quickly realize that it's very hard to calculate the steel amount and the aluminum amount in a product and to comply with that. And so they are making some changes. They are not being super forthcoming with us about what those will be. So the minute we know, we will definitely be putting information out about it. Also, in terms of like defense and what's going on in the Middle East, we've seen the Defense Department a couple weeks ago released that they're increasing their metal stockpiles. So nickel is one of them. It hasn't made its way to recycled steel or aluminum, but I could see it expanding. And those are just stockpiles they keep in case of wartime. They also have this new critical minerals agreement they're trying to negotiate to keep critical mineral supply chains here in the United States, and metal scrap was part of that conversation. And all of that has to deal with defense, national security, keeping things here in case it's needed. But a lot of it is just currently in the works. So we will definitely make sure to let you know when we know more.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Sam. I just want to give you some context from my point of view, and I'm going to say something pretty radical, but I hope tariffs stay in place. I hope that they are a locked-in amount over a long period so it's easier to change your business accordingly. And I hope the original plan works out. Now, let me tell you why. Because I believe if it doesn't, what we have coming is a lot scarier than what you see right now. I lived through export controls. In South Africa, which was a huge exporter, overnight the government passed a law that if you want to export any scrap metal, you had to get a permit. The way you got a permit was you applied to export material. We were the biggest exporters by far in Southern Africa. You had to apply to get a permit. And in order to get that permit, every single melter of that commodity had to turn it down. But they were allowed to buy it at a 20% discount to export. Now, that affects this industry like you don't understand. Like, there is excess material in this country for almost every commodity. If all of a sudden you have to get a permit and everybody domestically can buy a 20% discount to export for scrap, which think about what those numbers look like on copper, all it does is it moves our profitability straight onto the consumer. And I experienced that. We went out and bought copper foundries, and I experienced firsthand how much more profit a consumer can make, but it's all taken from the scrap dealers. The loss of incentive to recycle is there as well, because now all prices are dropped drastically. So less material gets exported. But now, the reason why I say I want tariffs to work is because I believe that the pressure that has originally come on from all of our consumers will carry on. It's not going to stop. It will carry on coming on. And if tariffs don't work and everybody overturns tariffs, there will be something else. And I fear that the something else is a lot scarier than what we're experiencing right now. I had a great conversation with Andy Golding just the other day, and the reason why I'm saying this is he actually asked me to be vocal about what I experienced in South Africa. It will ruin the scrap metal industry throughout the entire country if export controls are put in place. Kev Gershowitz.
Hi, thank you for being on the panel. I have two questions, one for Aaron and Dave. Aaron, you mentioned something before about nationalization in terms of the United States, and I'd like you to comment on that. And Dave, I'd be curious to know your opinion if you were a company in the United States and not Canada, and how your opinion would differ on tariffs.
So my opinion on tariffs is irrelevant of where my owners are located. I want to be calculated in my response. So I don't know that I'm as frustrated, Dave Bestwick speaking, with the tariffs as I am with the lack of clarity behind them. One day they're 20%, and overnight they jump to 45%, and then the next Monday they drop to 12%, and then the following Friday we're back up to, and I mean, if you charted it, it would literally go like this. So when I owned a business, I don't want to deploy capital when I don't know certainty. I don't feel comfortable in the market, right? And I think we probably all nod along with that. We've got a lot of equipment guys sitting in the room, right? Who wants to go buy? We're looking at buying a new baler. It's a 12-month lead time on a baler. They're not cheap to bale stainless steel. Who wants to lay out that kind of capital when you don't know what it's going to cost to get it to you? How do they know what they're going to pay to put the parts together? So my position on tariffs is irrelevant of the Fleischers living in Toronto. I'm an American first. I'm a pretty proud American, actually. I think there's imbalance in our world trade, but I would suggest that that's because of decades of inaction from a whole lot of elected leaders, right? And I'm just not a knee-jerk guy. So to try to knee-jerk that in 12 months, I think is really hard to absorb as a business owner. So I would like to see personally a more calculated, inclusive kind of conversation where the players are all at the table and it works for everybody. I think it's here to stay personally. I don't think we get away from tariffs. I would just love to see it be thought out and set so that we can all plan our businesses around it. If you tell me the rules, I'll play the game, but you can't change the rules when I'm on the 20-yard line, the 30-yard line, 40-yard line, 20-yard. It just makes it really, really hard. Did that answer your question? I don't understand your question.
I stand with Stu. As a scrap dealer based in New York in the United States, and yeah, this is an individual selfish view, but tariffs have been good for my company and my industry and the people that are in it. So from that perspective,
I misunderstood.
When I hear a company based in Canada talking about tariffs, I think that you have to have a much different view being from Canada than me being in the States.
So the tariffs haven't affected us. Mm-hmm. So our view is neutral. We have no view because it did for that short window. And I'm not going to lie to you, we were pissed, right? It was a big number. Our lawyers tell us that's coming back. So as of last week, everyone's breathing a lot better.
I think you'd sleep better at night if you spoke less to lawyers. But Erin, I would love for you to comment on the nationalization.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just using language that administration uses. You know, we obviously have tariffs, but as Stu's saying, export controls is something we're fighting right now because it is coming. There's been a couple proposals for aluminum export controls. The copper 232 resulted in, we fought off export controls, but it's requiring that 25% of
so how does that fit, sorry for interrupting you, but how does that's a nature and habit of mine. How does that fit into what you're saying, into the definition of nationalization? Because to me, the definition means that the United States government is taking over Gershow.
Yes, and so exactly, that's why when we say at REMA, we believe in a free market. We want things to move where they have to go, but when you control the exports and you control the tariffs on what's imported. And the administration uses that word multiple times when they talk about how important certain industries are for manufacturing. This industry is top of mind for them. We meet with them every single week. They want things staying here in the United States and they want to control if they leave or not. And it is something that it's coming down the chain, and it's why we're fighting so hard to make sure that you have access to export markets. Because if there's too much here, right? You don't want to lose your customers abroad. So, Yeah.
There's been an extensive amount of work and cost and study done for availability of raw materials, copper, aluminum. Did I say that right?
The right way is aluminium.
Oh, copper, aluminum, nickel, and stainless, right? The trade association, the non-ferrous team have put a lot of time into that. And a third party has proven that we have excess recycled material. We have excess scrap metal in the United States. And we can argue about export controls and 25% of this and 10% of that. But again, to measure the data, the black and white without emotion, which is hard, I get it. But to look at the data proves that we have excess material in the United States. And REMA's position is we should have market access wherever that market is,
I
right?
agree, but I would suggest that REMA could use less toxic language. Nationalization seems to be more of a word to incite things than it is about the reality of things. And that's why I hung on that word. But thank you very much, and I appreciate you all attending.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kev. Good point around, I guess, using the right language,
Sure.
especially when we're up on stage or putting things out on social media as well. Unless anybody has any other questions, I think we're done here. So I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you guys for joining us. I think that was really informative and you all did brilliantly. And thank you guys for joining us as well. Cheers.
Thank you, Stu.
That's it for this episode of Born Scrappy. If you have any questions, stories, or topics you want us to dig into, send them my way. Until then, keep it scrappy.